Jeanette Jennings has stood beside her daughter, Jazz Jennings, a young, transgender girl since childhood, even as the world struggled to understand, accept, and label her. I hope that by sharing my story I could kind of redefine womanhood and show that despite being born biologically male, I still represent all of the qualities of femininity that women represent. Through television cameras, best-selling books, and public praise, Jeanette became the symbol of unwavering support. Smiled, defended, and inspired. But behind the public image was a deeper story she never told. Now, after years of silence, Jeanette is ready to speak. Not as an advocate or public figure, but as a mother. What she reveals about Jazz is not dramatic or scandalous. It is the truth, and it's not what you think. Different child from the start. From the outside, the Jennings family looked like a typical middle-class American household, living in a quiet Florida neighborhood. Janette and Greg Jennings worked hard to provide for their 4 children. They believed in discipline, education, and supporting their kids' passions. Their home was filled with the usual sounds and energy of a busy family, shouting over homework, laughter from the living room, and the constant hum of daily routines. Friends and neighbors saw nothing out of the ordinary, but something was happening inside that house that most people would never guess. Their youngest child, Jazz, stood out from an early age. Even before she could fully speak in sentences, Jazz was doing things that didn't match what others expected from a child assigned male at birth. At just 15 months old, she began showing a strong preference for things that were considered traditionally feminine. She played with dolls and would drape herself in her mother's clothes. She didn't just enjoy these things occasionally. She sought them out every single day. And more importantly, she insisted on being seen and treated as a girl. At first, Jeanette and Greg didn't know what to think. Like many parents, they assumed it might be a temporary phase. They told themselves it was probably just curiosity or part of growing up. But as time went on, Jazz's behavior didn't change. In fact, it became even more intense. By the time she was 3 years old, she was clearly identifying as female. She corrected people who called her a boy. She became upset when she was forced to wear boys' clothes. She wanted nothing to do with the label that came with her birth gender. Confused and concerned, the Jennings began looking for answers. They spoke to doctors, psychologists, and anyone who might have insight. Eventually, they were told something they had never considered before. Specialists explained that Jazz showed all 3 key indicators of being transgender. She was persistent, insistent, and consistent in her gender identity. These were not just passing preferences. They were signs of something deeper. After further consultations, Jazz was officially diagnosed with gender dysphoria, a medical condition where a person's gender identity does not align with the sex they were assigned at birth. This was in 2003. At the time, the world was not talking about transgender issues the way it does today. There were very few resources available. The internet held little helpful information. Most people, including doctors, were still learning what it all meant. The Jennings had no guidebook. They had no one in their immediate circle who could relate. They were on their own. Despite the unknowns, Jeanette and Greg made a bold decision. They would support Jazz no matter what. They didn't fully understand everything yet, but they loved their child too much to ignore her pain or silence her truth. That decision would change the course of their lives in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. At the time, behind the scenes, Jeanette was already beginning to carry the emotional and mental weight of it all. She had questions no one could answer, and fears she couldn't yet voice. And though she was Jazz's biggest protector, she had her own private doubts and silent struggles. One day she knew she would share those private thoughts and memories, and when she did, it would be the truth about Jazz that people didn't expect. The Jennings had taken their first steps into the unknown, but they had no idea how public and how deeply personal their journey was about to become. When school became a battleground, when Jazz started school, her family hoped it would be a smooth transition. At home, she had always been allowed to live as a girl, and her parents, Jeanette and Greg, supported her completely. But the outside world was not as accepting. From the moment she walked into her classroom, new challenges appeared. Students and even some teachers did not understand her. What should have been a fresh start quickly became a daily struggle. Almost immediately, Jazz began facing discrimination. Some of her classmates laughed at her. Others whispered behind her back or moved away when she sat near them. A few children openly mocked her for being different. She was excluded from games, ignored during group work, and left out during lunch. The bathroom became one of the hardest parts of the story. Jazz was not allowed to use the girls' restroom, and the boys' bathroom did not feel safe. Each trip to the bathroom became a stressful event filled with fear and embarrassment. Even routine activities in the classroom turned into moments of tension and isolation. Jeanette and Greg quickly realized that something was very wrong. They reached out to the school hoping for a simple conversation. Jeanette contacted her daughter's teachers and asked to meet, but no one seemed willing to listen. The teachers avoided the topic. The school principal gave vague answers. It was as if no one wanted to get involved. I think they were afraid. Jeanette would later say the silence was more than frustrating. It was painful. Jazz was suffering, and the people in charge were doing nothing to help. Desperate to make a change, Jeanette and Greg decided to take a bold step. They contacted a local newspaper and shared their story anonymously. They hoped that public attention would pressure the school into taking action. Although the article did not name Jazz or her family, it was clear who the story was about. The impact was immediate. School officials could no longer ignore the situation. The school finally agreed to meet with the family. Jeanette and Greg did not come alone. They brought doctors, lawyers, and experts who could explain what it meant to be a transgender child. They came fully prepared to fight for their daughter's rights. The meeting was long and emotional, but their persistence made a difference. In the end, the school agreed to important changes. Jazz was allowed to wear girls' clothes to class. She was also given permission to use the girls' bathroom. It was a huge step forward, but the experience left its scars. These early years shaped much of Jeanette's fierce commitment to defending her daughter's right to exist as her true self. So much of her internal struggle remained invisible to the world. Jeanette had begun building a story inside her, a fuller, deeper truth that she hadn't yet told. But she would one day, and when she did, it would surprise even those who thought they knew Jazz best. What followed next would thrust the Jennings into the national spotlight, and nothing could prepare them for what came with it. The moment America met Jazz in 2007, something extraordinary happened that would change the conversation about Gender identity in America. Jazz was only 6 years old when her story first captured national attention. That year, she made her first appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show, where viewers across the country were introduced to her for the very first time. Soon after, she and her family took part in a high-profile interview on 2020 with Barbara Walters. For many Americans, this was the first time they had ever heard directly from a transgender child. Jazz's calm and clear words, "I am a girl," were powerful. "Are you a boy or a girl?" "I am definitely a girl. Like, that's all I consider myself as." They were honest, simple, and unforgettable. At that time, very few people had seen positive or respectful representation of transgender individuals in the media, especially not children. The 2020 interview was a turning point. It shocked some viewers, educated others, and deeply moved many. The story gave hope to other families facing similar situations. In the weeks that followed the broadcast, dozens of families with transgender children reached out to share their own stories. Many said they no longer felt alone. However, the decision to speak publicly was not easy. Behind the scenes, Jeanette and Greg had many long discussions about whether or not they should allow their young daughter to appear on national television. They spent a long time thinking it over. They worried about what could happen if the media treated their daughter like a curiosity or used her story in the wrong way. The world at that time was not very accepting, and they knew the risks. But they also knew the importance of visibility. Jeanette had one very firm condition. If they were going to do this, the interview had to be done by Barbara Walters. Jeanette respected Walters as a serious journalist who could be trusted to treat Jazz's story with care, fairness, and dignity. She did not want her daughter to be sensationalized or misunderstood. Jeanette wanted the world to see Jazz as she truly was, a normal, happy child who simply knew who she was. What most people didn't see was that while Jazz confidently smiled for the cameras, Jeanette was absorbing the brunt of the backlash, fielding hate mail, monitoring online comments, and quietly suffering in her efforts to protect her daughter. She knew then that a deeper story had yet to be told. One day, when the time was right, she would share the entire truth about what those early media years had really been like. And by now their story had reached millions. But it was only just beginning. Life on TV and the storm that followed. On July 15, 2015, the Jennings family once again made history with the premiere of I Am Jazz on the TLC network. The show introduced viewers to Jazz's everyday life. Audiences followed Jazz through her high school years, witnessing her friendships, her struggles with anxiety, her gender-affirming medical treatments, and her ongoing effort to simply be a normal teenager. The series also gave viewers a close look at her family's role in her life. Jazz's twin brothers, her older sister, and especially her parents played a key part in helping her overcome every obstacle she faced. The show quickly gained attention and broke new ground for transgender representation on television. It became one of the top 50 original cable shows, earning praise for its honesty, emotional depth, and impact. But with success came a darker side. Not everyone was ready to accept Jazz's story. As the show grew in popularity, so did the backlash. The Jennings family became frequent targets of hate and cruelty. Online trolls filled comment sections with vicious remarks. Some people accused the family of wrongdoing, calling them abusive for allowing Jazz to transition at a young age. Right-wing groups and media figures launched attacks on the show and its message. One of the most publicized moments of hate came from Derek Dillard, the husband of Jill Duggar from another reality TV family. Dillard tweeted that being transgender was a myth and repeatedly referred to Jazz using incorrect pronouns despite knowing her identity. The hate wasn't just online. Jazz received death threats. Some people went as far as calling the family's home what they say, "Get out of here. Too many of you, damn. This is exactly what we've been afraid of. It just doesn't stop. It's okay. Give me a hug," and leaving threatening voicemails. These moments created serious concerns for the safety of Jazz and her family. Yet, through all of this, Jazz's mother, Jeanette Jennings, remained strong and determined. She stayed by her daughter's side during filming and defended her at every turn. Jeanette made herself the public face of the family's defense, choosing to absorb the criticism so that Jazz could focus on growing up and enjoying her teenage years. Jeanette took on internet bullies, challenged false news stories, and pushed back against anyone who tried to harm or discredit her daughter. She understood how important it was for Jazz to live her truth openly and proudly. Despite all the stress, Jeanette and her family worked hard to keep life as normal as possible. They tried to protect Jazz's childhood and provide her with the space to thrive. Their story was not just about one girl's transition. It was about the power of family, the strength it takes to stand up to hate, and the ongoing fight for acceptance in a world that is not always kind. But the weight of it all was building. Jeanette had stayed strong for Jazz, but her own story, the emotional toll, the fear, the sacrifice, remained untold until now. The world had seen the public battles. Now it was time to hear the private truths. The struggles didn't end after the cameras stopped. Even after I Am Jazz came to an end, the attention surrounding Jazz did not fade. In fact, it seemed to grow. Although the show was no longer airing new episodes, Jazz remained in the public eye. Every post she shared on social media, every public appearance she made, and every interview she gave was met with strong reactions. Some people praised her for her courage and openness. Others criticized her harshly, often in very personal and cruel ways. The backlash did not stay online. It followed her into her private life, and at times it became overwhelming. Despite all of this, Jazz kept moving forward. She chose to continue her education and enrolled at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The transition to college life was a major step. At Harvard, she faced the usual pressures of academics, but she also had to carry the weight of being a public figure. She tried to keep her focus on school while continuing her work in activism and LGBTQ+ advocacy. Her parents, Jeanette and Greg, visited often. During their visits, they spent time together exploring the city. They enjoyed walks through Harvard Square, dined at Russell House Tavern, went shopping along Newberry Street, relaxed at the Boston Common, and even visited Fenway Park to watch a game. These family moments gave Jazz some relief from the stress, but the challenges remained. While in college, Jazz also went through a major personal transformation. Lost over 100 pounds and documented her journey openly on social media. Talked honestly about her struggles with binge eating and how she worked to overcome unhealthy habits. Her followers saw her progress, but not everyone understood the full emotional toll behind it. Jazz made it clear that her journey was not just about losing weight. It was about learning to love herself, even when it was hard. She also spoke openly about her mental health battles, including anxiety and the pressure of constantly being seen as a role model. Her bright, positive energy was still there, but behind the scenes, things were not always easy. This was the backdrop for a deeply personal joint interview that Jazz and Jeanette gave to People magazine. It was time they decided to stop hiding the pain they had both carried. Jeanette especially felt the moment had come. It's time to tell everything, she said, and when she did, it wasn't what people expected. Jeanette breaks her silence. In their emotional joint interview with People magazine, Jeanette and Jazz sat side by side to share the truth behind their journey. This wasn't just another media appearance. It was the culmination of years of untold stories and hidden struggles. Jeanette opened up first, revealing the depth of her ongoing worry. I do not feel that I'll ever completely let Jazz go, she admitted. It's not like a codependent thing. It's just that I've been worried about her for so long and she's been through so much, and that just doesn't go away. No matter how old she is, I'm always going to worry. Jazz responded gently but firmly. You can't be worried every single time I'm not with you. When will the day come when you no longer track me on my phone, or will you always track me? Jeanette's voice softened. There's just a lot of people out there that don't have respect for transgender people. That quiet admission hung in the air, honest, raw, and filled with years of unspoken fear. In that moment, Jeanette allowed herself to be vulnerable, revealing a lifetime of emotional armor, worn thin by years of fighting for Jazz. Jeanette further elaborated on her struggle to loosen the reins. I trust Jazz in certain situations, she said, and in others I do not trust her at all. Her honesty was striking, not just about Jazz, but about herself. Jeanette wasn't pretending to be the perfect parent. She was admitting the very human difficulty of letting go. For Jazz, that difficulty was equally real, but her response was filled with grace. I'm ready for you to take a step back, she told her mom with a mix of tenderness and independence. Speaking candidly, Jazz acknowledged the growing pains of entering adulthood. I would say the most difficult aspect of growing up is just kind of leaning into the things that Mom used to do for me, that now I have to do for myself.